Max Verstappen is not threatening to quit Formula One because he lost a race. That would be too simple. He is threatening to walk away because the future of Formula One may no longer feel like racing to him. And that single sentence should terrify the entire paddock. Because when the fastest driver of his generation looks at the 2027 engine rules, the 50-50 power split, the electric energy management, the political fight between manufacturers, and Red Bull's unstable RB22, he does not see a new challenge. He sees a version of Formula One where the driver matters less. And here is the part nobody can ignore. Verstappen has already made the condition brutally clear. Approve the 60-40 engine change, and he stays. Delay it, block it, or let the current direction continue, and Formula One could lose its most dominant star at the end of the season. This is not a tantrum. This is not media drama. This is a warning shot aimed straight at the future of the sport. Because if Max Verstappen walks away while still at the peak of his powers, it will not just change Red Bull. It will change the championship, the driver market, the power of the teams, the next generation of cars, and the entire identity of Formula One. And the most dangerous part is this. Canada did not calm the crisis. It exposed the truth. Subscribe to the channel. At first, this looked like just another Formula One storm. A champion has a bad weekend. The car is not quick enough. The team looks tense. The cameras catch the frustration, the microphones catch the emotion, and suddenly the whole paddock is asking whether something bigger is happening behind closed doors. But with Max Verstappen, the mistake is thinking this started with one bad result. It did not. This began long before Canada. Long before the podium. Long before Red Bull started trying to rescue the RB22 from a season that was already slipping away. The first warning came before the car even existed in physical form. Verstappen had already made it clear that his future was not only tied to his contract. And that is the detail that changes the entire story. Because contracts in Formula One can look powerful from the outside. They have dates, money, clauses, lawyers, signatures, and public statements that make everything seem locked in. But a contract cannot force a driver to love the car. A contract cannot force a driver to enjoy the direction of the sport. And a contract cannot force Max Verstappen to spend years of his life inside a machine that he believes takes the instinct out of racing. That is the first real crack in this situation. His deal may run until 2028, but his commitment was never as simple as a date on a page. He had already connected his future to the new rules, and more importantly, to whether those rules would make Formula One feel enjoyable. Not easy. Not guaranteed. Enjoyable. And that word is everything. Because Verstappen is not a driver who built his reputation by needing comfort. He built it through pressure. Through brutal consistency. Through weekends where the entire field knew that if they made even one small mistake, he would punish them instantly. He can accept a fight. He can accept not winning every race. He can accept that Red Bull will not dominate forever. But what he cannot accept, and what he has now made impossible to ignore, is a car that stops feeling natural. That is where this crisis becomes bigger than Red Bull. Because Formula One has always sold itself as the peak of driving. The place where the fastest cars meet the bravest drivers, where a human being still has to make decisions at impossible speed, with no room for hesitation. But the new engine direction created a question that sounds technical on the surface, and emotional underneath. How much of the car should still belong to the driver? That is the part casual fans can miss, because from the outside, the cars still look fast. They still scream down the straights. They still brake late. They still attack corners. The lap times still look extreme. But inside the cockpit, the feeling can change completely. A Formula One driver does not just press the throttle and hope. He feels the car through tiny signals. The rear tires, the brake balance, the power delivery, the way the car rotates, the way it gives confidence or takes it away. For Verstappen, that feeling has always been his strongest language. He does not need the car to be gentle. He needs it to be honest. And the new rules threaten to make the car less honest. That is why the engine split matters so much. The original direction pushed the cars toward a massive dependence on electric energy. Half the power from combustion, half from the electric side. To someone watching at home, that may sound like progress. To a driver like Verstappen, it can feel like interference. Imagine you are sprinting down a road, but your shoes decide when they want to give you grip. Sometimes they push you forward. Sometimes they feel heavy. Sometimes they respond exactly when you need them. Sometimes they wait a fraction too long. You are still running. But you are no longer completely free. That is the kind of feeling Verstappen appears to be fighting against. Not because he hates technology. Formula One has always been technology. Red Bull's greatest years were built on engineering brilliance, aerodynamic detail, and obsessive control of every tiny advantage. The issue is not technology itself. The issue is whether the technology starts to change the character of driving. And once that question enters the paddock, it does not stay small. Because if the driver has to think too much about energy deployment, battery state, and when the electric power will arrive or disappear, then the driving challenge shifts. It becomes less about pure attack, and more about managing a system that may not feel the same from one lap to the next. That is devastating for a driver whose genius lives in repetition. Verstappen's strength is not only that he is fast once. It is that he can hit the same level again, and again, and again, under pressure, while everyone else starts to fade. He builds a rhythm that feels almost cruel to his rivals. He does not just win races. He squeezes the air out of them. But if the car changes character depending on its energy state, that rhythm becomes harder to trust. And trust is the invisible currency of a Formula One driver. Without trust, the brake pedal feels longer. The steering feels heavier. The corner entry feels less certain. The throttle becomes a question instead of an answer. And that is when frustration starts to become something more serious. This is why his early comments mattered so much. He was not simply saying the car needed more speed. Every driver says that. Every team wants performance. Every season has upgrades, setbacks, and excuses. Verstappen was pointing at the soul of the car. He was warning that the direction itself might not be something he wanted to live with. Then the season began, and the fear started to look real. Australia did not give Red Bull the start it needed. The car had problems, the result was below expectation, and suddenly the team that once looked untouchable looked exposed. Still, one race can lie. One weekend can be messy. One bad result can be explained away. But Japan made it impossible to pretend. 8th place for Verstappen was not just a number on a results sheet. It was a signal. A shock to the system. A result so unfamiliar that it forced everyone to look again at what was happening. And after Japan, the tone changed. This was no longer quiet concern. This was a champion saying out loud that the situation was not healthy, that he was thinking about the bigger picture, that being 7th or 8th was not the worst part. The worst part was not enjoying the type of car. That sentence is the key, because it separates the pain of losing from the pain of disconnection. Losing can make a champion angry. Disconnection can make him leave. And that is the danger Red Bull and Formula One are facing now. They are not dealing with a driver who simply wants a better result next Sunday. They are dealing with a driver who is questioning whether the entire next chapter is worth the cost. The travel. The pressure. The politics. The endless calendar. The time away from family. The public scrutiny. The physical risk. The mental drain. All of it can be accepted when the car gives something back. But when the car does not feel alive in the right way, the balance changes. And this is where Verstappen becomes uniquely dangerous for the sport. Because he does not sound like a man who needs Formula One at any price. Some drivers cling to the paddock because it is their whole world. They cannot imagine the silence after it. They cannot imagine Sundays without the grid, the anthem, the lights, the pressure. Verstappen feels different. He has other passions, other projects, other ways to race, compete, and live. He has already achieved what most drivers spend their entire careers chasing and never touch. Multiple world titles, iconic wins, records, dominance, a place in history that cannot be erased. So when he hints that he could walk away, it carries a weight that most threats do not. It does not sound like a bluff from someone begging to be convinced. It sounds like a choice from someone who knows he has options. That is why the paddock reacted. That is why the media did not let it disappear. That is why every comment after Japan started to feel like part of a larger countdown. Because Verstappen was no longer just unhappy with a weekend. He was challenging Formula One to prove that its future was still worth his presence. And once a driver of his level frames the situation like that, every technical meeting becomes more than technical. Every engine discussion becomes political. Every regulation update becomes personal. Every Red Bull struggle becomes another piece of evidence. The story was no longer about whether the RB22 could be fixed. It was about whether the future of Formula One could be fixed before Verstappen decided he was done waiting. Then came the part Formula One could no longer hide behind. The rules were not just creating frustration inside one garage. They were creating a political fight across the entire sport. Because when Verstappen's comments exploded, the conversation stopped being only about Red Bull's pace. Suddenly, everyone had to talk about the engine formula itself. The balance of power. The electric deployment. The way the car behaved under acceleration, braking, and attack. And that is when the first real escape route appeared. The 60-40 proposal. On the surface, it sounded like a technical adjustment. A change from a 50-50 balance to 60-40, giving more responsibility back to the combustion engine and reducing the dependence on electric energy. But that description does not capture the importance of it. For Verstappen, this was not just a percentage. It was a lifeline. Because 50-50 meant Formula One was moving into a world where electric energy management became almost as important as the driver's natural feeling. The car was not only being driven. It was being managed, calculated, controlled through systems that could change the way a lap felt from one moment to the next. And Verstappen's problem with that was brutally clear. He did not want to become a passenger inside a puzzle. He wanted a race car. That sounds simple, but inside Formula One, simple ideas become complicated very quickly. Because every rule change creates winners and losers. If a team has already built its engine concept around the 50-50 split, then changing the target to 60-40 is not just a sporting decision. It can destroy months of development. It can erase an advantage. It can turn a carefully planned future into a problem overnight. And this is where the story becomes dangerous. Because the debate was no longer about what would make the cars better to drive. It was about who would gain, who would lose, and who had enough political power to shape the next era. That is why Verstappen's threat became so powerful. He was not sitting at the table as a manufacturer. He was not voting like a team boss. He was not writing the regulations. But his possible exit gave him a different kind of force. The force of consequence. If the sport ignored the drivers, especially the most important driver of the era, it risked proving that the future was being designed without the human being at the center. And once fans start believing that, the damage becomes much bigger than one technical rule. Because people do not watch Formula One to admire a battery chart. They watch because a driver brakes later than seems possible. Because he trusts a car that looks impossible to control. Because for 1 second, the line between genius and disaster becomes so thin that nobody can look away. That is the emotion Formula One sells.